Hello and welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Tracy. How we doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to have you on as well. And we've kind of been speaking a little bit off air. But if you just let us know who you are and what you do and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I am Tracy Zimmer. I'm the Assistant Director of Strength and Conditioning at the University of Florida. Been here 5 years now, and love where I'm at.
As a strength coach, we deal a lot with Excel's, spreadsheets, and building out the best program that we can for our athletes. Although, when you have these large amount of spreadsheets and Excels and printables and packs that you need to hand out to your athletes, it can get a little bit overwhelming, especially with large amount of files. Mine's personally has crashed, deleted, and that to me is a big burden. That's why since starting my own business, I've went with TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is an all in one programming software that has truly changed and leveled up the way I coach and the way I program for my athletes. With TeamBuildr, you can create customizable workouts, track your athletes' progress in real time, and even generate performance reports with just a few clicks. Athletes can also fill out their own workout data by using either the tablet or their smartphones in the weight room, which, most importantly, eliminates the paperwork that we all hate. This also gives your athletes accountability for their program and their progress as they are immersed within it. If you are interested in using TeamBuildr, head over to teambuildr.com and sign up using code PACHALKUP. That's PACHALKUP to start your 30-day free trial. So if you just let us know like a little bit of what you do in terms of your role and how that applies to the teams that you've got under you.
Yeah, so I came to Florida and picked up men's and women's swimming and diving and lacrosse. And I've got a pretty robust lacrosse background. I played in college, played growing up. So it's kind of a sport that I've always been around and involved with. Whereas swimming, I really didn't have a whole lot of experience. And I also picked up the team from somebody who is still here and has been at Florida now 22 years. So kind of to be honest, I felt like I was kind of riding on his coattails, but have developed my own kind of pathway with the team. Really cool to have two sports that are very different, both in the coaching styles and the demands of the sport. And I feel like I'm at a place where I can learn every day, which I think is really important.
Yeah. With your sort of background in playing lacrosse and now sort of going into different coaching styles, how has that helped throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should probably start with where I started. I was in Philadelphia getting my master's and finishing my undergrad degree at Temple University. And being in Philly and playing lacrosse, I couldn't complete my internship, which you're required for most majors. So I went across the city to the University of Pennsylvania and interned for a summer, and then kind of worked my way in to a part-time position. And at the time, they transitioned from a 5,000 square foot weight room to a 20,000 square foot weight room. And with that, they were able to bring on another full-time staff member. So it kind of worked out where I, was at Penn as in a volunteer capacity as an intern, part-time and full-time, which if you look at a lot of coaches' careers, it doesn't work out that way where they're in one place for, an extended period of time, which I feel very fortunate to have been there for 9 years. Um, and then as coaching goes, the stability can be questionable at times. So I was also part of a staff that got let go. So there was
Oh,
three of us who had a combined 27 years of experience coaching at Penn. There was some new administrative oversight, and we were all kind of told like, if you feel like you fit this model, you're welcome to reapply for your jobs. And I knew I wasn't interested in staying, but grateful for my time there. So felt like I was like floundering for, a few months, but I ended up becoming an intern, professional intern. Basically, I got the NFL Bill Walsh Fellowship and worked with the Atlanta Falcons for the 2019 training camp and preseason. And at the time, just kind of looking for full time positions in the college setting and ended up at Florida, where I've been ever since. So
yeah. It's a very diverse background of sports as well. How
for
has
sure.
sort of each implement like each program that you've been a part of now shape the way that you coach and sort of look at sports development and how to bring up the athlete?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to your question you asked about kind of lacrosse, um, being at Penn, very different, where we had 4 full-time strength coaches for 33 varsity sports, whereas now I'm at Florida where we've got, 17 sports, 16 on the Olympic side, and 9 full-time coaches. So I have greater involvement with the teams that I have, but a lot less, I hate to say responsibility, but my time's not spread so thin. Where at Penn I had,
Mhm.
200 plus athletes, and here I still have over 100, but I'm able to do a lot more with each of those teams. And I think coming from a background where I worked with so many different types of sports, types of athletes, it kind of sets you up for success to be able to discriminate between, good, better, and best when it comes to training and the groups that I have now.
How has that sort of shaped your adaptability processing?
And I think that's part of coaching, right? We're problem solvers, and you've got to be able to kind of think and maneuver and pivot. If you have a plan, that's great, but you've got to be able to adjust with changes in what the coaches have going on, or what the athletes have going on. Whether it's an injury or athletes just didn't get enough sleep. We work in a setting where they're 18 to 22, 24 year olds who might not have the best habits. So there's a lot of the X's and O's piece that you can really dial in, but at the same time, they're people, and you've got to be able to get them to do hard things and work with them and meet them where they're at.
Yeah, we speak a lot about the educational part of our role in this podcast, and it always amazes me that, like, yes, we're coaches, but part of our job, like one of the main parts of our job, is to teach these athletes like better ways to deal with a life situation. So like how to become a better human, be accountable, consistent. But it's all also that thing of like let's really dive into your sleep. Like, what do you need sleep wise and recovery? What do you need nutritional wise and recovery? And just these sort of aspects that build out the athlete and the human. What's some of the processes that you go through to teach your athletes like this is perhaps something that you should be implementing or something that you should be avoiding?
Yeah, I think it goes beyond me. I work with athletic trainers, dietitians, coaches. There's a lot of additional staff members that are around that I can also lean on, so it doesn't just come directly from me. And when you think about college athletics, you're allotted so many hours
Mhm.
in your off season, in season, right? So say we get 8 hours in the off season, how can I best maximize the time that I have with them and have those conversations in addition to accomplishing our training goals? So for me, a lot of the times it's just observing with body language, how do they walk into the weight room, knowing what they have going on outside of just practice and training. So, I mean, I'm always just fascinated by people, like what's your major? Why are you interested in this? And, if you, where do you come from? Primarily, lacrosse is a Northeast sport. So a lot of those athletes are relatable because, I grew up in the Northeast, outside Philadelphia. Whereas swim, we have a pretty big international contingent. So, I mean, there's so many different backgrounds, and it's fun to learn about the athletes, learn from them, and then kind of be able to like pull from that and really get the most out of them from a training standpoint. Once you're invested in the athletes, know that you care about them as a person, not just the athlete.
How do you maneuver the different cultural sort of challenges that arise throughout the program?
Hmm. I think the culture stems a lot of times from the head coach. So for me, it's just kind of reinforcing what they've already communicated. And I think that the athletes that we get at Florida, and specifically with the teams that I work with, they come in with an understanding of like we're here to be great. We're here to compete at a really high level, and if you want to be elite, this is the work that you have to put in. And coming in and seeing athletes who have come before them, it's like there's a real sense of pride of being a Gator, which makes it really fun and challenging. And, it's not every day is different, but, every day you're trying to just get, 1% better.
And I think that's a good way to describe it as well, is that 1% better each day. I read this book, it's called Peak Performance, and it talks about like how I forget his name, but he started coaching the GB cycling team, and like he really broke down into like every time you finish in the bathroom, wash your hands, and that's like that 1% better for that day. what are the sort of conversations that you have to really drill into them that we're here to do greatness?
Uh, I mean, I think it starts with the athletes as well, right? Like knowing that they already want to be great. I don't kind of have to pound that into them. It's kind of bringing it out of them more. So with, lacrosse, it's different because it's a team sport. There's only 12 spots on the field, whereas swim, it's objective. Did you swim a fast time, and are you going to be the best in your event? So I approach both kind of differently. Swim is the culture in the weight room is great. Everybody understands like lifting is going to help them, because once they start to see results, it does transfer over
Mm.
to their starts or their turns, ability to maintain swimming form underwaters. So I feel like from a swimming standpoint, a lot of the times it seems like, especially the new athletes that come in, they see our veterans and they're like, oh, I want to be as strong as them, which is great. But at the same time, we're not going to chase numbers, right? We
Mm.
have to move better. And the weight that you can lift will progress, right? And I always say, like, form. I mean, if you have better form, obviously you'll get stronger faster. And I think like that's one thing that I pride myself on is having athletes that are really technically sound. So it does actually help them in their sport. Um, for lacrosse, on the other hand, it's like I inherited a team that didn't have a strong lifting culture. So it's kind of been really fun to see them develop in the weight room and understand that the results are actually helping them be better at displaying their skills on the field.
With the sort of not chasing numbers and focusing solely on movement efficiency, how is that done through, like, as a freshman? How does that then progress on to when they're sort of at the more senior level?
Yeah, so I kind of take everybody in the same spot. I kind of meet them where they're at. It's great when athletes come in with lifting experience, but at the same time, if you have no experience, then you have no bad habits. So for me, I kind of meet them where they're at. Um, I would say the biggest thing I do is kind of assess. I do like an overhead squat, and use that as part of a snatch transfer series before introducing Olympic movements, and kind of get them going with that. Everyone starts with an empty barbell if they're coming in, whether they're a transfer or a freshman. I see where they are, and then we kind of progress accordingly. And then, honestly, like my programs stay pretty consistent. Every year I add or remove a few things. But if you look at elite performers, I mean, year round, they're probably operating between 8 and 14 total movements, especially when it comes to championship season. What's been successful and what are you going to leave in, or what are you going to take out? I think less is more, and um, our greatest attribute is time. And if we're taking too much time to accomplish a goal, it's like why are we doing that?
Yeah, it's that whole thing of focusing on the fundamentals and really building out that way.
Yeah.
With the 80-14 movements, what are the movements that you predominantly use and how do you program them out?
Yeah, I mean, I would say just with all athletes, kind of hinge, push, pull variations. It's really fun because I think earlier in my coaching career, I was very focused on numbers, but the coaching staffs that I worked with were also focused on that. And I think as it's shifted to just movement quality and really game performance or swim performance, it's been fun to give the athletes the autonomy. So everyone kind of starts with basic, squatting patterns, clean variations, Olympic lifting movements. We'll do some press, pull ups. After the first really 2 cycles with my teams, I start to give athletes a choice, right? And if you give them the
Mm.
autonomy to choose what exercises they feel are going to help them best, you're also going to get more out of them and seeing them execute the movements and try to challenge themselves with those movements that they chose.
I think that's a really good point to hammer on, is like, as soon as you start giving athletes the option to implement something that they like, their sort of focus changes and it's more like, yeah, I kind of want to be there now. Like, I want to do these things. Is that something that sort of you've seen progress through your programs?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think with social media, you also get athletes coming to you wanting to try things. And I'm always trying to give them the best. And I didn't swim, so if my swimmers come to me with something, like I will highly consider it. But then when I give athletes the choice, and the better swimmers are choosing the harder exercises, that also informs my future decisions when I'm planning in the early stages of the fall semester when our athletes just return to campus. So I think it's just also really interesting to kind of educate myself along with them and see what they're doing when they do have the
Hmm.
choice.
Have you found that progression with now TikTok and social media being like this influx of what strength and conditioning is in that sort of realm to what we actually do on a day to day?
Yeah, but I also think it depends on the environment that you have, right? What equipment do you have access to? How much space do you have in your room? If I wanted to run lacrosse in the weight room, it just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because we have a turf surface, but we play on grass. So, if I'm going to condition them, I'm going to condition them on the field that they play in. Same with swim, right? Like I'll have them sprint, I'll have them jump. Um, when people talk about sports specificity, I'm not having them do things that are really mimicking swimming,
Mm.
right? Like that is what the sport takes care of. And going back to the time component, if the swimmers have say 9 practices a week, right, and they're with me for 5 days, 3 lifts and 2 dry land sessions, which really is just conditioning. It's just a swim term. I'm trying to make them better movers on land, but really swimming relies a lot on momentum. So, not necessarily chasing numbers, but trying to make them better movers and not focus. I mean, I know it's really popular. It seems to be getting more popular to be very sport specific, but you want to build a more resilient athlete, give them a better engine, so that way it actually helps them in their sport.
Sport specific is bullshit. Like you cannot get sport specific in the weight room. That's like what you said. Do your sport. If you want sport
Yeah.
specific, do your sport. And I get it's frustrating because like people like create these exercises that look amazing, but then you break down as to what they're actually doing. And you're just like, oh, you're combining two lifts that could be just split up and done properly.
Yeah, also if you get an athlete in a one-on-one setting, sure, you can get really creative and throw a bunch of stuff at them. But if you've got, a group of 40 male swimmers and all of them are just chomping at the bit because they're seeing other guys clean, and or if you've got, 40 female lacrosse players and everyone's trying to accomplish different things, it's like how do you manage those group sizes if you're, really trying to think outside the box, but at the same time, like just get them stronger, have them jump and produce force and land better. And, you think about the demands of the sport, you don't have to bring that into the weight room. And I think people tend to get lost in the weeds with seeing things on social media and trying to implement it, but does that work for your setting?
I like to talk about load management as well. And the thing with sport specific is because it mimics the sport so much, that could lead to repetitive stress injuries and injuries that occur through essentially not doing the movement with the same proficiency, right? Because as soon as you add weight onto that movement, the technical side of that movement can either be jeopardized or you can throw it off so much that then it starts becoming injury prevalent. And again, it's the thing where like I mean, I started this industry when I was 13. That's when I first had my first S&C program. I started like helping out with the coach through work placement when I was 14. And like back then we didn't really know what sport specific was. But as I went through my university, I was like, oh, sport specific, yeah, that looks cool. But then
Hmm.
the more I learned, the more I speak to coaches, I'm like, yeah, what the fuck am I on about? Like that's stupid.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more specific than playing your sport, right? And if you try to mimic those skills in the weight room, like you said, you could be taking away from that ability, right? Or you could be leading to injury for overuse. I think it's fun when you get to do movements that your athletes are like, wow, I feel like this is really helping my sport. But it's also fun to see the athletes just move better, and people forget that like lifting is a skill.
Mm.
And as we said, like the weight room kind of transcends life, and these are skills that they can carry on with them beyond just their 4 year athletic career.
100%. I think like that's what I go into this industry for is like my S&C coach had a positive impact on my life from then on. So like for me, I want to carry that on and really like build out humans as opposed to just athletes. And I
Hmm.
think that's the way I like to look at this industry is like we're not just an athlete industry, we're a whole human industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of your principles for your program, what are some of the things that you consider when changing from swim, dive, and lacrosse?
Yeah, I really consider the amount of time that I have with the athletes. Swimming, obviously, very objective in terms of the sport and competition itself. I don't measure a whole lot for them. I write my programs out, so there are 4-week training cycles with a 1-week deload where I cut the volume and I introduce new movements, or we stick with the same movements with maybe a different intent, and then kind of flows that way throughout the year. And what's really cool for swim for me is that they're probably one of the most consistent teams and the hardest working, right? Like if you're in the pool for 9 hours or 9 practices, so 18 hours a week, and then you're with me for 5 sessions a week, it's really trying to see, okay, like how can I be efficient with the time, how can I get them to execute certain movements? Swim, they're really consistent. So it's fun to kind of program them in a way where we're 4 weeks on, 1 week deload, and it cycles through that way all year. And then we'll taper around major meets. But for them, it's doing the same thing for the most part year round, right? And I think part of the monotony of that, it I'm able to change it up in the weight room, by changing kind of the intent behind what we're doing. And for them, it's seeing the power or strength help them swim, faster times, and really, I guess, kind of develop the qualities that they need for the water that they don't have. A lot of swimmers, if you see them on land, like they all hyperextend their knees, or I'm like the posture police because they're all, their shoulders are kind of rounded forward. So kind of trying to keep them in a healthy place overall.
Is that something you consider while programming? Is their posture and hypermobility?
Yeah, for sure, but I think it's also what makes them great at the sport, if they spend that much time with their pool work, it's the same thing with like land-based athletes. How the way they move is going to reflect what they do the most, and the qualities that they have allow them to be great. So, I know a lot of times I'll focus on improving weaknesses, but I also want to keep their strength strong.
In terms of like load management, because athletes are usually in the pool like 6 in the morning, then they'll have. I'm guessing like I'll go swim, practice in the gym, and then swim again, and that's how it'll be split.
Hmm.
How in terms of like load management and sort of how do you manage that excessive amount of training each day?
Yeah, so I actually manually write in their weights for like our biggest movements. So cleans, snatches, squat variations, pressing variations. And then they get the, kind of choice for all the assistance work. And my coaching cue is always just go as heavy as you can with good form. And that's like the real caveat. And I think more often than not, I have to pull people back, which I like that they want to challenge themselves. But that's also where you have to be willing to oversee that and tell athletes like, this is too light, this is too heavy, and then give them a clear path to kind of work up to that over a 4-week training cycle, and then I guess reframing what they're capable of for the next training cycle.
Yeah. So does your sort of training cycle go increasingly heavy, or is it more like undulating?
I think it's both, and I think it depends on the athlete, right? Like we have novice swimmers who or novice lifters as incoming swimmers. And if they have very little experience, yeah, they're going to see strength gains pretty rapidly. And I think for me as well, it's like if their body composition changes so much, that's going to affect the way that they swim. So then I have to look at, am I doing them a disservice by
Mm,
maybe having them do too much too soon? So it's kind of like really individual in that everyone's body is different and people react differently to weights. If you look at people with more robust training history, our juniors, seniors, maybe professional athletes that I work with, they've got more muscle mass typically, and that's also going to take them longer to recover from. So it's kind of managing each athlete individually with the weights that they're lifting and events as well. So a lot of times people will ask, well, do you train distance swimmers differently than you train, sprinters? And honestly, no, not really. Like there's a few differences here and there, but the weight that each individual is capable of lifting is going to be different. And maybe the speed with, bar speed's going to look a little bit different for a distance swimmer versus a sprinter. So just observing those qualities and trying to kind of enhance what they have and work with where they are. It's managing that in the weight room.
yeah. I mean, I like that because it takes away the And again, I hate talking about periodization at this point because like it doesn't work. Periodization does not work because like just now you've got athletes that are in the Olympics and you've got athletes that aren't there at all. So like
Hmm.
from a standardized normal periodization, you'd kind of be screwed right now, right?
Yeah,
I've been trying to figure out how to ask the type of model that they use without calling it periodization. But I always like that conversation because it gives you an insight into how a little bit more in depth how the program works. And I'm a big Angeline periodization guy because there's times where they're going to have meets that are a little bit more important than others, and I kind of want them to show up and show out for that one.
for
So
sure.
I'll usually maneuver my program so they're getting a little bit of a deload slash lighter week on that week prior to the big competition, and then just go for it.
Yeah, so before every year, I take the competitive calendar and I write down all the swim meets, dive meets, and I kind of see like if I'm starting week one, the week that everyone gets back, what is it going to look like for each of these 4 week cycles with a 1 week deload? Sometimes it lines up to where they're rested, but because we are really trying to compete at a high level, we don't rest for a lot of meets. You know, we'll have a dual meet at home, and the team will come in, will practice if it's a 2 o'clock meet, the team will practice in the morning, lift in the morning, and then treat the meet as a second practice, you know, which is it's incredible that they even do that. And then when we get to bigger meets, you know, it's a conversation that I have with coaches. You know, we have a mid-season meet, which is kind of like a trial run for our conference championships, SECs. So that's usually in November. And the mid-season meet sometimes we'll try to taper down for it, but it really also depends on the athlete, right? So I'll talk with the coach and he'll say, you know, these people kind of need to cut back. These people just let's keep training, which, you know, once it's communicated from the coach to me to the athlete, then they understand like, okay, well, this is the plan, we're going to follow it. And I think part of having part of the athlete trusting us is seeing that
Mm.
we've been successful with athletes before, and reassuring the athlete that like this is what we think is best for you, but at the same time opening up the conversation, like if you don't feel like this is best for you, like tell me what you feel like you need and we'll kind of like meet in the middle.
In terms of like the way you've just described the day before, like the day of the meet, what's your take on like neuro prep before events?
Prep in terms of like lifting
Like,
same day,
yeah,
or yeah, I mean we get after it. So for swimming, we'll have like our two kind of like strength power days where it's a little bit more barbell focused, dumbbell accessory work. And then Fridays we'll do more plyometrics and some turf sprints and kind of like a dumbbell upper body circuit. And I feel like that day they probably get the most freedom to choose the exercises, right? If I'm saying pick a dumbbell pressing movement, I mean, I can think, you know, off the top of my head, like 15 different exercises. They don't start off there, but by the time we do get to those competition weeks, they've been exposed to multiple different pressing variations, and I let them choose. So um, I think obviously maybe not going as heavy as you would if we didn't have a meet, but still getting in full volume of work.
see, I've been tinkering with the idea of fast, explosive movements right before a meet or a competition, and I've got a couple sprinters that I do that with, and they all claim to feel a lot better and like more explosive and more out of the gate for it. And I still need to do a lot more reading on it. But like I love that, like that's how they feel in general, like coming off the blocks or coming off like just competing. And for me it's like it's that constant pursuit of learning, and like this is something that's relatively new to a lot of programs, and it's like that fear of am I making them more tired for the competition? How do you sort of justify that aspect to your athletes?
I didn't have to do a whole lot, to be honest, because I came in and the team knew, like, okay, well, we lift on the day of meets if we're at home. So it's kind of like they know what to expect. And you look at the, you know, sophomores, juniors, seniors who've now done it. The freshmen, they're always the most timid on those days. Like, wow, you're actually lifting like normal weights. Like, yeah, like weights that you would lift if you didn't have a meet. So I think it's just like the mindset that the swimmers have. Um, so I feel kind of spoiled in that sense where other coaches might have to fight a little bit more to get the athletes
Mm.
to put the work in. But when you know you're really truly going to taper for 3, maybe 4 meets in a year, right? So, like, just this year, for example, we tapered for our midseason meet. We did not taper for SEC championships. We tapered for NCAA's, tapered for Olympic trials, and then the Olympics. So you've got 4 meets right there, and that's the calendar that you're really working with for
Mhm.
this kind of a cycle.
How does your cycles change with the different types of competitions that you've got coming up?
I think it's individual at this point for all the athletes who are representing different countries at the Olympics, but for our collegiate athletes, they know, okay, here's what we're working towards, and the rest of the year we're just training.
With having Olympic athletes, obviously, essentially, their training cycle begins straight after the Olympics, so you've got 4 years to prep. How much of that is more like a year to year to year than looking at the next Olympics for you?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I came to Florida in so 2019, and then obviously Tokyo got pushed back, so 2021, and now this was like a shorter cycle with multiple world championships in between. There are things that I did prior to this Olympic cycle that I kind of removed. For example, I use boxing for conditioning and hand-eye
Mm,
coordination, great for shoulder conditioning. But that's something that I didn't introduce just from a shoulder health standpoint for people who maybe don't have that kind of athleticism on land. Um, so I know that's something everyone's really excited to do this fall,
mm,
without so much pressure on not just what we do in the weight room, but really our coaching staffs. I think obviously what we do is important, but I always think, like, how much of an impact am I really having on performance given the amount of time that I've had to spend with them, considering all of the past history of training that they've put in to get to this point. So I feel like what we do is just one really small piece of the puzzle, and if you can get the piece to fit right, I mean, you're in a really good spot. But it doesn't make it any easier because every year you're trying to just get better by milliseconds.
yeah, I like the boxing for conditioning because it's tough, especially if you've got swimmers who rely heavily on the shoulders. How
Hmm.
is that sort of transpired in your program, including that in?
So when we do our dry land days, I usually just I teach that, and we'll do some trunk work, some grip work, and then that kind of handles the conditioning. To be honest, it's probably a lot less stress on them than what we normally do, whether it's Gator Mountains or a turf circuit or fan bike sprints. And I don't think you know if it's great if the coaches give me an hour for each training session, but if I don't, I'm not looking to just hit a time limit. I'm looking to accomplish certain goals. So if I can increase that lactate threshold, right? Really push their anaerobic capacity while we're together. I mean, the workout could be 10 minutes, depending, right? Fan bike sprints, if you've done them,
Oof.
they're
Hmm.
just
I
brutal,
love
right?
that.
Yeah. So I mean, there's ways to accomplish goals without using a ton of time, and I think really that's what I'm looking to do. Like, what's the least I can do for the most results and give them their time and allow them to recover and educate them on, different areas of within sports performance that we provide at Florida, whether it's nutrition or athletic training and recovery. We have, you know, unlimited recovery tools here if the athletes are interested. And, a lot of times our athletes are looking to get that much better. So
Mhm.
they use the resources that we have.
What's Gator Mountains?
So the inside the swamp, our stadium here, we seats just over 90,000. It's essentially running or walking the bleachers, everyone to
Uh,
the top. So go to the top, come back down is one rep. We usually start with 6 for swim, 5 for lacrosse, depending. And then we've gotten up to 8, but I at one point had some women who just wanted to keep going, so I had to cut them off around like 12, 13. Yeah, it's brutal, but great for reinforcing like knee drive and running form, and it's hard. It's strength work.
yeah, how steep are the steps?
So the bottom half of the bowl is not as steep, and then when you get towards the top, it's pretty steep.
I don't know if you've been to the the University of Washington Stadium, um, but we got them to run the stairs, and like the thing with Coach Mack is he likes you to do the workouts before the athletes do it.
Hmm.
And like I was like, oh, stairs sick. So we did them, and it was brutal. And I
Yeah.
mean, like I love it now because like it it's that again mindset that it gives you that little. Are you going to, pardon the terms, be a bitch and quit, or are you going to keep pushing through whatever pain you're feeling?
Yeah.
I like. I think at one point I ran them like 2 days in a row. Like my legs were done, but it was like that's a really fun exercise to one condition, like you said, knee drive, which is important for sprinting. It's important for like speed development work as well. But yeah, stairs for me is like I love them now because like you really there's so much that goes into it as well.
Yeah, I have a
With
bit of love hate. When I was younger, in my 20s, I did some bodybuilding, and I would just live on a stairmaster, which now I will never get on one of those things. But then a few years back, I had this idea. I was like, all right, let me start with 2 Gator Mountains every day for a week, and then three every day for a week. So I worked my way up. My goal was to get to 10 every day for a week, which that's a lot.
yeah,
And so I went through that. I didn't miss a day, but then I had to combine some days with travel
mm,
with my team. So I remember it would have timed out to go to the end of February, and we had SEC championship. So I'm away for a week with swim. So I had to front load the week. So I did 30 in one day, and I look back. I'm like, no wonder I was always tired.
damn.
Yeah,
I think that's a mentality though, and on that, I think this is it's weird to have met someone and you talking openly about it. It's like that little mindset of like I'm guessing you like to experiment with yourself before you do something as well.
for sure.
I I spent the month of December 2 years ago doing 50 pull-ups every single day without missing a day. If I had missed a day, I would triple the number. So at one point, I had to do 150, and like spacing them out is rough.
Yeah.
But that taught me a lot because about myself, especially because I was like, you have to spend days just every single day going in and just doing it. Like you just switch off, and then I've got workouts that I had to do before or after, and it's just that how do you play about with it?
Hmm.
What other things have you sort of experimented with?
I mean, I gotta say, like, I think that's one thing that I love about my job. It's like I have no excuses because I go to one of the best weight rooms in the country, and surrounded by all these elite athletes. Um, and I love training. I realize not everybody does, but I think that's part of the fun in coaching is getting people to see how it helps them and get them to like it. And I'm kind of like always experimenting, but I think it's a shame when there's coaches who coach that don't also train. So for any younger coaches out there, I would definitely say like be a guinea pig. Like if you don't like training, maybe this isn't for you. Because it fires me up every day when I get to train whatever I'm doing. But I competed in, let's see, after college, I did a couple powerlifting meets, bodybuilding. I fought Muay Thai, and then I haven't competed in anything for 2 years. But when I moved to Florida, I competed for 2 years in the Grid League, which is essentially co-ed competitive relay races with lifting and gymnastics. And there's different specialists. So um, training for different things and kind of seeing what I'm capable of.
100%. And I think that's Coach AJ said this the best. And it's like to be an effective strength coach, you need to know, you don't need to know everything about the sport, but you need to be well versed in sports to be able to help your athletes the best way possible. And for me, it's like I love tinkering with the dark side of our role, like really pushing that boundary between we're comfortable we can make it through the session, okay, but now we're going to take a step further and exhaust everything you have, because there's going to be competitions that or meets that you have that your competitor is going to take you to a whole different level and you need to
Hmm.
keep up.
Yeah.
What's your sort of take on the dark side and how you implement that into your training?
Me personally, or for my athletes?
I want to know
Both.
both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Me personally, I think it's tough because like I'm pretty strong, and some of the things that I've done, I look back and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did that. But having people to lean on where I'm at and kind of challenge me. For example, like Matt Delancey, who I is somebody at Florida that I took over swim from, works with track, won the last three outdoor championships on the men's side. He's incredible, and I had 4 weeks at the beginning of the summer. I was like, yeah, I'm here all 4 weeks. Like, give me something to do just to see where I'm at strength wise. And I was coming off of a lacrosse season with a ton of travel. So I had maybe one day a week where I could actually get in some solid barbell work, and having, probably 7 or 8 weeks of of lift, one day of lifting a week. I was like, let's see where I'm at with 3 days of lifting. And he gave me that. And, I was back to squatting 315, like pretty easily with a safety squat bar. So that's most recently what I've done. But going to the dark side for my athletes, I think swim kind of knows how to do it because their practices are
Mm.
really challenging, some of them. That the weight room becomes an outlet for them to express their strengths in a different way. We haven't really touched on lacrosse, but obviously there's a large conditioning component to the sport. You know, you're running for 60 minutes or four 15-minute quarters, and the game has gotten a lot faster with some rule changes.
And
And
more violent.
we do two conditioning tests. We do 5 300s going
Okay.
30 yards and back using the restraining line. So goal line to restraining line is 30 yards and back. Looking for an average of 63 seconds for the 5 reps with 2 minutes rest. So that's tough. Out of 40 athletes, I think we've had, or at least in the last year, we had 2 or 3 reach that standard. A lot who are really close. But I think it's important to set the bar high and keep the bar high so the athletes know what we're working towards. So I would say 300s.
How is the drop off in sort of oxygen and energy uptake between the sets?
It depends. You know, like our faster athletes are able to sustain higher speeds and repeat the effort. But what I'm looking for is really like that their first rep and their last rep is not going to be like a monumental drop off, right? Like if they can't recover and repeat efforts, I mean, how can you expect them to play in a game and be able to display their skills without also thinking about them? You know, that's what I always say is we don't condition so that way you get better at the conditioning drills. We condition and do different things so you can better display your skills on the field and not have to think so much as you're going through the game, right? Like if you don't have the engine to be out on the field, you're going to be thinking so much about the game that you can't actually display your skills. Um, so then another conditioning test that we do is the Manchester United, which a lot of people are probably familiar with from soccer, but it's essentially 2200s where the first 10, you're sprinting down 100 yards in 25 seconds. You have the recovery jog back. And every minute after those first set of 10, the sprint time gets a second faster to where that last sprint is 15 seconds down with a 45-second recovery jog back. There you go. That's it. So we do that, and that's kind of gold standard. And one of the most memorable things for me last lacrosse season was one of our defenders. We're in the middle of conference championships, playing JMU at Vanderbilt, and this was after like a 3 hour rain lightning delay. You know, it's now 90
Mm.
degrees, no shade anywhere, and she's grabs a water bottle and she's like, I feel like I could run the menu right now, but I don't want to. And I'm just like, this is why I do what I do, so that way they can like have the energy to play, you know?
Yeah, it also does a lot psychologically because, like, obviously, as you compete, it's not just your body that gets tired, like, your mind gets tired, and then, like you were mentioning, your skill drops off because you can't automate your thinking to perform that skill the way you do. So,
Yeah.
like, I had a discussion with someone before, and it was around quarterbacks and why they have to partake in conditioning skills. And for me, I explained it in the sense that think about how much thinking and looking and just quick movement that they have to do in a split second to be able to throw the ball or run back, throw the ball under that amount of pressure. Like they need conditioning because their minds are racing so fast that that's also elevating the heart rate. That's also requiring them to have more in that tank to be able to do these skills effectively.
Yeah, I mean, it's the technical, it's the tactical, it's understanding game strategy and being able to do that under fatigue.
You kind of touched on the assault bike, and I personally love an assault bike. What's your go-to drills on that, and how do you sort of condition your athletes on them?
So with it depends. I use them more with swimming than I do with lacrosse. And typically we'll do 10 to 12-second sprints with 90 seconds rest. So I'm giving them full recovery because I want them
Mm,
to kind of haul ass on those. And it's also interesting because you know your athletes, if you've seen them go all out, you also know what it looks like for them to not go all out. So then you can kind of
mm,
question like, why are you dogging it? So there's periods where I'll bring out a clipboard and I'll have sprints 1 through 8, and you've got to write down all of your max watt or your average watts, and we'll kind of see if like there's drop off or if there's a big discrepancy between the previous time when we tested when you felt like you were in a great place. because a lot of times we do this, we'll do it after a swim practice. So again, like if you want them to know what it's like going to the hole, you've got to take them there.
Yeah, I love how you call it the whole.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of resources or books that you would sort of preach about in this industry?
That's tough. I mean, I'm a pretty avid reader. I think most strength coaches are. And if not, you're listening to podcasts or you're just talking to people. I don't have one that I would say is, I hate to say relevant, but one of my mentors gave me Purposeful Primitive, which is kind of old school, more I would say powerlifting style. I know I know there's like a lot of resources out there, and I would say if you're looking for something to read or get interested in, I think it should stem from like what you're truly passionate about. Like for example, I had some back injuries around powerlifting, so I went into all of Stuart McGill's, back mechanics and spine mechanics, and I think that if you can find a way to relate it to yourself, a lot of times you're going to be more interested in truly learning about it rather than just like somebody told me to read this book, so let me go get the book and read
Mm.
it.
No, I like getting different takes on books because, and I've started doing this recently where I ask coaches if they've not already mentioned the book because, like you said, we have to be avid readers, and I will always recommend conscious coaching because like that was the first S&C non S&C book that I read. That was like it's shaped the way I coach because like the way I walk into a weight room and try and identify who I've got in there changed because of that. And like I personally think I had success at UW because of that. Like I made sure to get to know my athletes first. Like before even I helped them, I was like, "What's your name?
Mm.
What's your why? Like why are you working as hard as you are? Why are you here?" Like all those questions for me painted this picture, and then I was able to build that connection because there was already mutual there. So for me, like conscious coaching is one of the best books I've ever sort of read in this industry.
What, in your experience, like having obviously a football background and now working with lots of different athletes, like what are some things that you see just observationally, like with athletes versus, just being in a football setting?
I, and this is something that I've had to adapt to, is American athletes are a lot more out there than most European athletes. Like they're more forward with what they think and say.
Mm,
So it's more for me. I in America, I was able to be my true authentic self because I like in the weight room I'm loud. I love to be loud. I will shout till I'm blue in the face. If that's what kind of motivates them. If they don't get motivated that way, I will switch up my style. So for them, I was able to just like give daps or help them up from the floor, and we were able to connect that way. Across here, it's more conversational. Let's get to know you first. Let's really build out your profile and see what you respond to. I think I'm a great believer in seeing what they respond to. If I like, I've got athletes that love getting shouted at, and I've got athletes that don't like getting shouted at. Like some of my female athletes, I've now gone to the point where they trust me enough to like encourage them. But at the start, I had to be very, "Hey, let's go. You've got this." Like more informative in the instructions I do because that's what they respond to. So for me, it's really just talking to athletes and figuring out what makes them tick. I also love key phrases. I've got them for myself. Like if I'm in a sluggish mood or day, like in my head I'm like, stop being a shy bag, let's fucking go. And like that's the switch. Like that's my switch to like really fucking bring out my performance. So I usually try and introduce that to them and see how they respond with it. Did that sort of answer your question?
yeah, yeah. No, I would agree in the sense that like um, the coaching styles from other areas of the world are a little bit different, because some of the international athletes that I come in, like they didn't have access to all of this equipment that we have. So their expectations versus what they're walking into is just very different. Like, and there's a different level of appreciation because
Mhm.
they didn't have it, you know?
I also learned that the importance of appreciation in America. Like here, you don't really hear athletes saying, "I appreciate you, coach," or just calling coach in general.
Mm,
Like when the first athlete, I was like appreciate you for today, coach. I was like, whoa, what is this? Like, A, you're calling me coach. That's weird. And then B, you appreciate me? So like from now on, like anytime that I'm with athletes, or like even it goes down to like if I'm in a shop and the service that I get, I'm always like, appreciate you, have a good day. Just
Mhm.
because like for me, like I really liked it and I liked how it made me feel like when I was there. So like now I'm bringing stuff like that more across here.
Yeah, I love that.
That's essentially my goal now, is like bring some of that culture, like weight room culture from America to here, because I think yous are great at sport, and like there's a reason why yous are always at the top. So why not try and replicate that? That's my thoughts on it.
I also think it's interesting because if you watch a lot of different coaches, like you're going to see a lot of different styles, right? Like you saying you like to yell, and I think I'm loud in the sense that like my delivery is heard,
Mhm.
but I'm definitely not a cheerleader. I'm more of a teacher, right? And I think that's where you get the buy-in, is that like you're teaching them a skill and you're teaching them things that are going to help them. Whereas I definitely work with some other people who are a lot louder in the room, but we're all able to communicate in our own styles to get our athletes to, do what we want and what's going to ultimately help them perform at their best.
Yeah, like I don't shout at like I don't. It's not shouting. It's like encouragement, but like in a
Yeah.
really amped up way. And
Yeah.
Coach Mark actually, so he's got these exit interviews with all his interns, and he sort of says where he thinks that we'll have success in, but he also tells you what you need to work on. And he had a really good exit interview with me because he was just like, "Yeah, this is. I think you're a great coach. This is what you need to do. Like, start a podcast. I think you do really well in that." And I was like, "Got it." And then he was like, "But," I was like, "Oh no." And then he was like, "You've got a small voice." I was like,
Mm.
"Oh." Like, so like I'm 5'8". I'm not the biggest of humans either. But he was like, it doesn't matter your physical size, but your voice needs to be louder. Not just
Mhm.
louder, hold that presence, hold yourself in the weight room to where people know that you're the coach. People expect you to guide them and lead them into whatever they're about to do. So for me, I was just like hurtful, but at the same time, like I didn't get butthurt about it. I was like, okay, how can I develop this? And like from now on, like I hold myself completely different in the weight room because he pointed out to me, because I thought I was being amped up. I thought I was bringing juice. I thought I was, doing what I was supposed to. But then he was like, "Yeah, just be a little bit more firm and present with what you're doing, and really build out that voice."
Yeah. That's good for him to say as a mentor and for you to be receptive to.
Yeah, and like I also think that a lot of people get butt hurt with criticism, and you kind of have to know where the coach is coming from first. Like it's in this industry, I've learned that people are more into the constructive criticism more than just attacking you. So like you
Mhm.
have to separate yourself from what they're actually saying, and like
Yeah,
really
for sure.
analyze. Like, okay, he's coming from this angle. This is something I need to work on because he sees that I could be better at this for this reason.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way we talk to each other as coaches, you probably observe it with your athletes, but you've got people who are sensitive to somebody saying something. And, I always say you've got to listen to the message, not the delivery, because oftentimes what they're saying is in your best interest, like just trying to help you. Um, so it's kind of taking the tone out of it and just hearing
Mhm.
what somebody has to say.
Like, and like, I love a feedback sandwich. Tell them something good, tell them something that they need to work on, then build them up again. Because like that for me is like another thing that I picked up from like psychology courses I took and books that I've read, is like people, if you start with a negative, people shut off immediately. Like, oh, he's being a dick. So let's deconstruct the way I give feedback so that they can accept that a little bit better.
Yeah, but I also think if you've established the relationships with your athletes, like you're
Yeah.
able to tell them, to be I'm very direct. I don't pull any punches. So if I say something to you, like I mean it and we're gonna get better. Just, like a lot of times, I'll have athletes later say like, "Hey, thanks for saying that," but like maybe in the setting they weren't prepared to for me to say something. But I feel
Mhm.
like I would be doing them a disservice if I just kind of walk by without saying something. So that's part of our jobs, is to pull things out of people and a lot of times say things that maybe they don't want to hear, but they need to hear, especially because, they're learning and they have so many different inputs from coaches, classmates, teammates, other people on staff. I mean, their parents. I mean, how do they discriminate between, what to actually take? And considering the amount of time we do spend with them, you've got to get a point across at times where you can't kind of form that positive negative positive sandwich and expect that like they are going to hear the negative. Sometimes they just got to hear it. So I think you once you build those relationships and your athletes know that you have their best interest. I mean, I certainly am very direct.
For the good jugular. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, you're right though. You are right. Like again, but it comes from that building trust and that relationship with your athlete first and foremost. What's a hill that you would die on in this industry?
Oh gosh. So I'm gonna ask you a question. If you could only use barbells or dumbbells, what would you use? Either barbells or dumbbells.
Yeah. Do I get two sets of
Don't overthink
dumbbells?
it.
I would
Don't
pick
overthink it.
dumbbells.
Okay. If you could only focus on mobility or stability.
I'm a stability guy.
Okay. So like there you go. Like there's different approaches, but you're ultimately working towards best possible outcomes. So I don't think like I can die on one thing. I think as coaches we have lots of tools in a toolbox and you use things at the appropriate time. You don't need to use them all at once or ever, right? Like there's some things that I've learned and I'm like, yeah, I'm probably never going to do that just because with the amount of time that I have with my athletes, the number of athletes or the personnel in the room, right? Like or equipment. Um, you've got to do what's best for where you are and the time that you have. So I think it's tough to say like you just die on one thing. Um, what is best for the athletes that I have in this moment, working towards the goals that we have ahead of us.
Fair. I like that.
Yeah.
What's your take on bucket filling for your athletes?
How do you define bucket filling?
So strength, power, endurance, and anything else that goes into their performance.
From a team setting like lacrosse, I mean, we all kind of start in the same spot when it comes to strength, speed. Everybody's kind of doing the same thing in the weight room, introductory, right? General prep. And then once we get through that first kind of 4 week training cycle, I'll modify things for individuals based on what they need. And a lot of times it comes from the coaches saying like, this person needs to just get a lot stronger, or this person's conditioning is not where we need it to be. And then kind of focusing on those aspects that we need to improve. And I think it comes from communication with the athletes, right? Like if the athletes perceive things as like, this is not helping me, like, why am I going
Mm,
to beat a dead horse and have them do something that they don't think is helping? I go back to like just an old example is I worked with fencing at
mm,
Penn, which is not traditionally a sport that had lifting experience. And, based on kind of their country club coaching, some kids were like, well, we got to do burpees. We got to do that. They had all these ideas of like, this is what I need. So you kind of had to be a salesman to like get them to understand like squatting is going to help you with overall leg strength and stability and producing a little more force and like answering the whys of what you're doing,
mm.
and kind of trick them into doing that by introducing other things, right? Like, so we would box for hand-eye coordination, which for fencing was great, but also we're going to incorporate these things that are really going to help you. And then once we did that and they saw the results, then it was like, oh, I understand now, So really, I think it's situational.
Yeah. Fun fact about fencing: their breaking force on the first step can be up to 7 times their body weight, and it's wild.
Yeah.
And I also didn't know how prevalent ACL injuries were with fencing until I started researching into it. It's
Yeah, it's a
mental.
ton of single leg. I mean, they're basically doing a repetitive forward lunge, or reverse lunge in a
Yeah.
sense.
No, I was like, and that I read this textbook on fencing, and it had them do like it was an S&C textbook for fencing, and they had them doing bodybuilding, like just straight up like bench, squat, curls, like your normal like bodybuilding movements. I was like, that's different take.
Yeah.
What's your PR song?
Oh gosh. I don't know. To be honest, I'm not a big music person. I'm like podcasts, audiobooks, or silence because so often when you're in a weight room for 12 hours a day listening to other people's music, it's like I need to tune everything out. So yeah, I don't know that I have one.
Fair.
What's yours?
Conditioning. Uh, I'm a big Tupac. Hit 'em up.
Okay.
Yeah, that gets me fired up. That gets me fired up. Conditioning playlist.
So I just take playlists from athletes. I'm like, oh, you got a country playlist? Let me get that. Or, I have a swimmer who had like an EDM playlist, which is not my kind of music, but it's fast. So if I'm gonna run, I'm like, okay, this is a good pacing kind of music. So really just depends.
I used to hate country music until I went to America and listened to country
Okay.
music. Now I've got like a whole playlist dedicated to country music, and I threw that on today in the car, and I was like jamming the whole way, and I'm
Nice.
kind of ashamed of it. What advice would you give new strength and conditioning coaches or coaches wanting to come into this industry?
It's a good question. I feel like there's so much advice you could give, but everyone's path is a little bit different. I think it's important to be confident in what you know and also confident in what you don't know, right? Like we were saying, like there's so many tools that you can use. Doesn't mean you have to use them all at once. Don't be afraid to ask for help, but I think it's really obvious when people try to do too much, and it's like, whoa, pump the brakes. Like there's building blocks here, and I think people can get a little bit lost with the amount of information and just walking into a weight room setting. Our weight room here is 26,000 square feet. We've got volunteers that will walk into our first training session where we've got 40 swimmers, 35 baseball players, a softball team, 22 athletes, golf, and but potentially like gymnastics. So we've got 5 or 6 teams all training in the same space.
Hmm.
Like, that's probably pretty intimidating to somebody. So, um, don't be afraid to ask for help and take notes. I think a lot of times there's people who think they know more than they do. So I never see people with notebooks anymore. I don't know if it's because of technology and phones, but like have a physical pen,
Mhm.
pencil, and a notebook.
Yeah, I've still got all mine from UW, and it's something I refer back to quite a lot. Um, I had Ray Zingler on a couple of weeks ago, and his advice was become a sponge. Just
Mm,
anything that coaches throw at you, just write it down, memorize it, and really get to know what they mean by it. And like the S&C industry is so fast paced when you're like at collegiate setting that not only do you have to become a sponge, but sometimes you kind of have to be a mind reader as well, because like you don't have time to get the details from A to Z. So you're
hmm
going to have to mind read some of the steps on it, and that's something that I feel like is a great skill to have. And like obviously you can't become a mind reader, but use your common sense to figure out what they mean by it.
Yeah, for sure. I also think, like when it comes to coaching, this conversation, other conversations, anybody's willing to talk and just share what they know, what they don't know, ask questions in return. And I think when it comes to the actual coaching itself, like economy of words is huge, right? Like if you have a limited amount of time, like how do you get your point across to get your athletes to execute the movements, which can seem hard when you've learned how to teach a clean and there's so many steps or a snatch and there's lots of steps, but how do you kind of distill it down in a way that's digestible and you can actually implement and kind of get after it right away.
The thing is as well is like athletes' brains can only deal with so much information at once. Right? So you have to be very concise with what you say. And like if I'm doing conditioning drills with my athletes, I know that I can't give them full sentences. Push, you've got this, you've got more in that tank.
Hmm.
I keep it to 3 words so that they can capture it within the very limited brain space that they have for words coming in.
Yeah.
No, perfect. Appreciate you so much for coming on today and spend some time with me and really getting to know your program and what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. This was great.
Perfect. Peace.